stay. Will jolt you into awakening by assaulting the bell. It's that I'm sitting in a lower position in this chair, so it's very awkward. I was getting my angle down pretty well last week, so gone to crap. So I thought having.
For not having right perspective.
That's right. That's coming up. I thought since we did the Four Noble Truths, it would be nice to do the Eightfold Path, except that to find something in the Christian calendar with 8 weeks is kind of hard. So I thought, well, we'll just do it during Lent, and you really only have 5 Sundays to work with, unless you want to ignore Palm Sunday, which could do, but that would still only give you 6. And then as I reflected on it more, some of them really don't make a whole day worth of talking anyway. But right view really does, I thought, and particularly in light of the temptation, which is the reading for this first Sunday in Lent, not the temptation. Who were not the guy, we were talking about this yesterday, who were not the guys that when I was taught to dance when I was in high school, and my aunt set me up with dance lessons with a college student that lived next door to her, and some record, wasn't the Four Tops, this is going to bother me till I figure it out. She had, and I learned to dance to that record, and had to buy it, but it wasn't the temptation.
Well, what was the name of the song?
I wish I could remember. There were 2 or 3. The fast one, the slow one. Anyway, right view, I want to say, evolves over time. And right view is important as that first reading. Wasn't it cool that I found a reading that actually said, this week we start discussion of the Eightfold Path to use on the week that we started.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. It isn't just a matter of understanding things. It's really a matter of understanding things so that what you do is the best that you can do. Notice I didn't say the best that can be done, just the best that you can do for that moment in your evolution. And that, I've noticed in my own life, really changes over time. And it's easy to fall into this place where we start to think that we need to be perfect. For example, I was at Holy Hill on Ash Wednesday. I'm not going to tell the story about the organ again. But there was... Thursday or something.
Thursday.
I haven't told it for the tape yet, but that's all right. I can save it till you've forgotten it.
Next week?
Next week, yeah. But there was a woman praying silently, out loud, in the space on the second floor of the St. Therese Chapel. Has a sign as you enter that says, please respect the beauty of the silence of this space. So for her, silence is whispering. And if you've ever been in a quiet room where people are whispering, it cuts through the air almost more than talking out loud. I mean, in an absolutely quiet room, you can hear a whisper across the room. And I'll confess, I was a little frosted. I was sitting in my pew going, really? But whereas 20 years ago, I probably would have said out loud, really? I decided I'd just put up with it and see if it stopped. And actually, I got so involved in my own meditation that I didn't even notice that she had left. And when I looked for her, she was kind of impaired by some of the and not impaired. I couldn't see her because of some of the pillars. And then when I, finally got up and looked, she'd been long gone. And so as it turned out, ignoring her was the best course of action. Now, if 20 minutes later she'd still been going, pss, 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 I would have had to make a choice to either leave or say something. And I want to say that the time comes when you need to say something. When we were making the coffee this morning before you got here, they must have been making coffee down the hall too, and the fuse blew 3 times. And by the 3rd time, the coffee here was just about done, and that usually makes it okay, but if it hadn't been okay, I said to Aaron, if it goes again after the coffee's done, I'm going to go down the hall and say, maybe whatever you're doing isn't working out, because I didn't want it to the lights to keep going off while we were all in here. That's okay. That's assessing it and saying something. There's nothing about right view that says you lose the right, no pun intended, to speak up for yourself. On the other hand, last night as I was driving and people were going out for Valentine's Day, I was driving for Uber, I picked up a couple and it was our Jesse Harriet's doppelganger.
No way.
Yes. Picked them up he and his wife up at the Crown Plaza in Wauwatosa. They get in the car, nice couple, so he's not exactly like Jesse. And I say that only because he watches these. So they get in the car, and I saw they were going to Mayfair, and I said, anywhere in particular at Mayfair? And he says, Magiglio's, or however you say it.
Maggiano's?
Maggiano's, yeah.
Whatever it is.
And at that point, I could have said, you mean Maggiano's? And taken the romance out of his evening right off the bat. And 20 years ago, I would have. But at that point, 20 years later, I said, absolutely. And we started on our way. And then I sort of ran through the other places he might have been trying to say. And, McCormick and Schmick, no, that didn't sound like that at all. It didn't sound like Maggiano's at all, but it was closer to, Magiglio was closer to Maggiano's. And I figured worst case scenario, if we pull up, he could say, not here. And I could say, oh, sorry, I misunderstood. It stems from something that happened when I worked in mental health, when we had an older gentleman in the unit who was probably early stages of dementia, but still quite fit, and tried to make it out the door when one of our lab people was loitering with the door open, and it ended up being a restraint situation, and we got him in the seclusion room and restrained, and he was quite angry, and he was carrying antibiotic. He was going to call his lawyer, and that wasn't a fair fight. There were 6 of you and just me, and finally it kind of clicked for me what was going on, and I said to him, it's never a fair fight here, but that's for your safety, and for whatever it's worth, you put up a good fight. And he had received his dignity back, and he was fine with it at that point. And I bring that up not to pat myself on the back, because it was just luck. But that's right view. It's seeing what's needed in the situation and being able to offer it. It is not cutting off my own leg because I think somebody needs one. It is not denying that I too have needs, and that I'm entitled to have my needs met, and that I have the right to have those needs met, and there's nothing that has any merit whatsoever that comes out of being absurdly self-sacrificing in the service of others, because at some point we fall apart. And so essentially what happens in the temptation, which by the way, 40 is a symbolic number, meaning the right amount of time, the amount of time it took. We know that if anybody kept a strict fast for 40 days, they would die. It only takes about 10 days without water. And I'm always kind of tickled by people, and a lot of them come out of the Pentecostal movement, who talk about they fasted for 40 days and they saw God. And, they admit that they're drinking water and juice and stuff. But, yeah, if you're that hungry, yeah, you're going to see God. You're going to see a lot of other stuff, too. And it's not necessarily going to be a religious experience. You're probably going to see all kinds of people. Herman Munster, God knows who you're going to see. But the thing is, what was offered? Power, sustenance, essentially wealth, the apparent need to be completely independent, that had under it a complete brain fart, a complete subjugation to someone else. And it all essentially looked very good, but wasn't really very good at all. And seeing through it was a matter of right view. Seeing through it was a matter of understanding that what was offered, while it seemed very good on the surface, was ultimately a matter of becoming enslaved. And those kinds of things in a materialistic culture are offered to us all the time. I hear conversations in my car between men about their pickup trucks that I don't know if they're talking, could they be more in love if they were talking about women? The engines, how big the engine is in my truck. Did you hear the noise the engine in my truck makes? Holy cow. I don't know what we're compensating for, but I have a pretty good idea. Right view sees through those substitutions we make. Real happiness takes work, takes a certain amount of self-denial, in that we have to set some time aside to working toward it. We have to learn to be happy where we are, and that's not a quick fix. So it's much easier to buy a bigger truck with a bigger engine that makes a better sound than your friend's truck with his big engine. It's much easier to get a new toy, a new house, a new job, but those things are all external. And remember the bumper sticker that said, "Whoever dies with the most toys wins"? Mm-hmm. Well, the thing about that is you really can't take any of that with you. And in a strange way, you also don't leave it behind. Because once you go, it's no longer yours. So the things that we both take with us and leave behind are the kinds of things that come out of right view. The things that build our relationships. The things that endear us to others. The things that build friendships. The things that cause friendships to last. The things that are kind of tedious, quite honestly, but reap a reward that, while it isn't nearly as impressive, I guess, as the roar of a truck engine, is much more enduring and much more valuable, and really both goes with us and stays behind. Because if we think about the folks that have trusted or touched us in our lives, who may be gone, they're still here. They're still with us. That hasn't gone away. I still remember my mother's parents almost every day. It is what lasts. There is the happiness. There is what matters. And all the rest passes away.